My name is Dr. Jim Holman, and as said, I'm the Senior Director within GEA for our pharmaceutical solids for technology management. So I'm involved for all of the product development, research development, and our test centers that we have globally. And I'm here today to talk to you about advanced manufacturing of solid dose products using continuous manufacturing, and our product family is called Consigma 4.0. So if we could have the next slide, please. So the agenda for today, I want to cover three key areas in the next 25 minutes. So first of all, a background to continuous manufacturing for pharma and what are the real drivers behind it? What is driving this new uptake of these new technologies? We'll then have a review of the Consigma 4.0 product portfolio itself. And specifically, we will look at three key areas that GEA provide technology platforms and solutions for. And then finally, we'll look at the technology differentiators of these platforms with some case studies, one on continuous direct compression systems and the other on optimized tablet coating. We can move on to the next slide, please. Continuous manufacturing in the pharma industry has been being assessed now for 15 years, and GEA has been providing technology into the market as the leading supplier of continuous technology since 2006. And recently, through Accenture strategy in 2018, there was a holistic review of the industry with input from 13 of the largest pharmaceutical companies that supply 60% of the global market. 7 of these were existing Consigma clients, and they were asked, what are the benefits and what are the challenges expected from the adoption of continuous manufacturing? And they came up with 3 key challenges and 3 key benefits. In terms of the benefits, it was very clear that there was a distinct advantage for agility of the supply chain, and we will go into that in a moment. There's also reduced footprint. With continuous manufacturing, you are intensifying your process and squeezing it into a much smaller area. So you save on GMP facility footprints, not just in the actual production environment, but also in your GMP warehouses, for instance. You have considerably less work in progress because you are taking a powder and converting it all the way through into potentially a coated tablet in one process train, rather than potentially having multiple different unit operations where you have a hold time in between. And then the third benefit was about easier product transfer. In terms of the main challenges, regulatory approvals was seen as a challenge within companies, but I think if you Google search or come to some of these conferences, you will see presentations from a lot of the large regulators, and they're actively starting to encourage the use of continuous manufacturing. The FDA in America is obviously coming up with its own guidelines with respect to continuous manufacturing, and it presents very heavily on the topic. We have had interaction around the world with agencies in India, in Korea, in Japan, as well as in the US. There's also the legacy infrastructure. So obviously companies have an existing manufacturing footprint that they can't just click their fingers and convert. So you have to consider CM as almost an asset replacement strategy as you go through the life cycle. So you won't be replacing everything at one point. It may also be that you want to apply continuous manufacturing for a specific pain point, prove the benefits of it, and then roll it out further in your company. And then the final part of the challenge that was seen was about change management and how you guide this step through in technology through your company. So next slide, please. So in terms of agile manufacturing platforms, one of the big benefits that we see is in the development of new chemical entities. So for new drugs that are being developed, the use of continuous manufacturing can have a huge effect on your development trial, because what you are able to do is you are able to use the same equipment for your phase 2B clinical supplies, potentially your phase 3 and your clinical material, and then into your initial commercial supplies. And with continuous, what you look at is you look at scale out, not scale up. So in traditional batch manufacturing, you might start at a 1 kilo batch size and then scale up to a 10 kilo, 100 kilo, 1,000 kilo. With continuous, the difference is you may run for less than 1 hour to produce one size of batch, so to produce less than 10 kilos. And then you may run for several hours to produce, 100 kilos or something of those lines. And then sizes over that, you're just flexible. So you can have run times that go on to days and weeks if you need it. So by eliminating that scale up, it allows for a more rapid development timeline because you don't have to go through those tech transfer and scale up studies. Next slide, please. The other part is continuous isn't just about new chemical entities. You'll hear a lot of it from large multinationals, the benefits for new chemical entities. There is also a benefit for your overall equipment efficiency, for just your operating efficiency, let's say overall. If you take the individual steps needed for a batch, which we have along the top here, so you go from dispensing, blending, calibration, the extra blending, the tableting and the coating. Each of these machines act in a batch mode and will be utilized for a different amount of time. Some unit operations will not be being used. They will be potentially sat there and having to be cleaned or something like that. So you end up with an overall equipment efficiency of your entire plant, which is quite low. So in this case, in this calculation, the example is 6%. And actually what you see is whilst the individual OEEs of the individual equipments might be reasonable, when you look at it as a process train, overall it's very low. With continuous, that is not the case because obviously all your equipment is working in harmony with itself. So there is no, you don't have a downtime of one unit operation while it's waiting for something else to finish. Everything operates at the same time, so you end up with a very overall equipment efficiency, which obviously increases the net present value of the manufacturing plant that you have installed. Next slide, please. As I said at the start, with continuous manufacturing, you do intensify your process into a smaller area, and also you require less work in progress. And what that has is it has a very big impact in your operational efficiency and your footprint. And this again is a study from Accenture on a business case, whereby they compared the same product and the facility footprint that would be required for a batch system versus a continuous system. And actually what they came up with was that using continuous manufacturing, the footprint of your facility would be reduced between 60 and 70%. So you could have 2 continuous manufacturing lines instead of 34 individual stations. And this would result in a footprint of 230 square meters as opposed to 680 square meters. And obviously, GMP facilities cost money to run. They require a considerable amount of power, not just the machines themselves, but the HVAC units, the lightings, and all of that. So this results in a power consumption saving as well of up to 40% because you have less footprint, but also you have less machines running. The other thing that you need is where you have intensified everything and you don't have as much material handling between the individual unit steps, is you have a considerably lower requirement for manpower. So in this case, they estimated the number of full-time workers that would be required would be 50% lower than what you would need for the equivalent batch facility. Now, continuous equipment will have a higher capex than the equivalent batch, but we find on average the equivalent capex for the whole equipment is about 1.4 times versus the batch process. So what you can see is while the initial investment is much higher, the actual returns from that investment are much, much higher to outweigh that. So in most cases, you can look at the business case and your payback will be quite a short period of time. There may be an initial higher outlet, but the savings and the reductions in running soon balance that out and soon actually make it a more cost-effective operation. Next slide, please. And I mentioned about the product transfer. As I said, without scale up, you can increase your time to market. So there is a study here from a large multinational as well that has presented this a number of studies, whereby they did all of their development through continuous, which is the bottom green section, but they also did an estimate of a product plan. What would it take if they had to go for the traditional batch scale up? And what you can see here on the left is that by using continuous, they had a release date to the market at the end of 2014, whereas when they compared that for their new chemical entity to what it would have been with batch, they wouldn't have been ready to launch to the market until at least the start of Q2 in 2016. So there's at least a 16-month saving there in your time to market. And obviously, the faster that customers can get product to market, the faster they can help their end user, the people that need the medicine. Also, this reduction in the time to market led to a significant savings in API. In this case, the amount saved was deemed to be nearly 1,500 kilos of API, and in development, API could be very costly. So there's a large amount of savings from the API to be had as well by switching to continuous for your development. Next slide, please. And again, the experimental time to complete. Each experiment on continuous actually takes considerably less time because you're not dealing with a large-scale batch. And so we have an example here of how long it would take to develop something on continuous versus how long it would take to then develop on batch. We'll move on to the next slide, please. So the key gear technology platforms. On the next slide, we can present that. I will show you that we have a product family that is called Consigma. The three main areas I wanted to show you today on the next slide, please. That's it. Yeah. Is that Consigma 4.0 is all about modularity, flexibility, and integration. And Gear has 17 years of experience in this product range. And on the next slide, we have our actual product family, which is then our Consigma. And I want to focus on the three middle areas here. So our direct compression lines, our bin-to-bin modules, and our tablet coater. As in the product family, there's also materials handling, our software control system, our R&D equipment, and our granulation and compression lines. But I'll focus on these middle three first of all. Next slide, please. So our integrated direct compression lines is a combination of dispensing, feeding, blending, and compression, all in a very concise footprint that sits within a single-story GMP room. And we have these available in two sizes, depending upon your throughput needs. In terms of the capability, we have proven both these systems, depending on which throughput you need, between 1 and 130 kilos an hour continuously. We have tested API ranges from 0.25% up to 93% API loading. And we also have an OEB4 proven containment using SMEPAC testing so that this can be used with potent materials. The systems are also available as wet in place for easy cleaning, which is often a concern with continuous manufacturing. Next slide. For the dosing and blending, so this is a feeding and blending platform without the compression. We have a flexible feeder table that can be configured to your needs with a range of feeder options from both Gear and from Catron Coperion. We have three options of different blending technologies to suit your application, and there are various benefits to the three different applications we have. And we can also interface this with existing customer equipment, whether it's a roller compactor, a wet granulation system, or even existing non-Gear tablet presses or existing Gear tablet presses. And in terms of the capability, we have designed systems that go anywhere between throughput ranges of 5 to 400 kilos an hour. Again, they can be OEB4 containment rated and have been SMEPAC tested to prove that. And they can be whipped again prior to disassembly so that it's safer for the operator when they break the system down. Next slide, please. So finally, we have our tablet coater, which can either be used integrated with a continuous platform or as a standalone system. So you can load from an IBC, direct from a tablet press, or from the end of the continuous line. And this is a modular system that allows multiple units to work together depending upon the throughput size that you need. We have proven applications of this coating technology with aesthetic coatings, enteric coatings, and API coatings. And one of the key benefits we see about this technology is actually how it presents the tablets to the coater spray versus a traditional coater is quite different. And we actually find that through proven studies with a number of our industrial partners and our pharma partners, you require significantly less coating solution to get the same benefit. And I'll show an example of why that is later. Next slide, please. We have a number of test stations around the world. So if you're ever interested in testing out continuous technology, we have our test centers in the US, in Womergem in Belgium, as well as our partners over in Singapore, South Korea, and Japan. Next slide. So now I'll quickly go through some case studies. I'm aware we're short on time, so I'll go through quickly one on continuous direct compression and then one on coating. Next slide, please. So one of the things we're often asked about our continuous direct compression system is what is the yield benefit? How much product you have to run to be able to prove a benefit out of this? And I have two examples for you. A short run example here that was a 3-hour run set up to run approximately 75 kilos of material. So it's set up at 25 kilos an hour. And we were running a 400 milligram tablet using a model formulation. So this study was done as part of a multi-company study along with AstraZeneca and GSK as well as Gear. And what we showed at the end of this is with a known formulation for a standard run, we were running, even for a short period of time with Conti, at a very high overall yield. So we were running with a yield of 99.6%. So a very high overall yield and lots of good material recovery. On the next slide, we then show the sort of opposite end of this, which is then a long run example. And this was run over 120 hours continuously, so 5 days continuous. And here we ended up producing 15 million tablets over that 1 week period. And we still end up with a very high yield of 99.2%. So it's a very robust platform with a very good yield. And both of these systems were run with commercial control strategies, with formal IPC testing to make sure that the product was always within specification. Next slide, please.